Hello.
Hello, a chaotic start
A
to
chaotic
another
start.
episode.
Amy and I are both rushing around
hmm
this afternoon, evening, so here we are.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the way it is
but
sometimes.
happy early St. Patrick's Day from a couple
Yeah.
of Irish/Scottish girlies.
I am so excited for St. Patrick's Day. I really
Me
do enjoy
too.
it.
Me too. I love it.
hmm
And it's a holiday, so you guys know what that means.
Yeah.
Scary stories. Um, Also, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is Girls Gone Spooky,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
and I'm Olivia.
Yeah, and I'm Amy, and I'm excited about this. We're
Me
wrapping
too.
something up. It's
Yes, we're
about
wrapping up the
time.
apartment series. It is about time. Okay,
How
should we just dive right in?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah, go
ask you,
ahead.
how long did this take you to summarize all of these parts?
Collectively, like an hour and a half, maybe.
Okay.
How
Yeah.
about you?
I mean, pretty much, yeah, probably the same, but
Like
like
an hour and a half.
that's with summarizing all of these parts
Yes,
and not even
same.
including like reading the last
I was,
part
oh
fully for
yeah,
me.
I know.
And wow, that's just like a little bit too much if you
Well, it
ask
should be a
me.
book. I mean, it
Right.
should be a book, like
Yeah.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that I would read the book.
Yeah. Same.
It needs a publisher. It needs an editor and a
Yeah.
publisher.
Yes.
But the story is good,
Mhm.
despite some plot holes that I feel like are a little bit addressed in my sections.
Okay.
Um, but it's good, and I'm excited because, like, I don't know, my sections are pretty good. There are like some plot
Yeah.
twists, so
Okay. Same.
um, okay,
Let's
so where
do
we
it.
left off was Jamie's back. So she's like,
Yes.
holy shit, Jamie
Mhm.
is a creature like Lila was, which she kind of knew,
Mhm.
but Mr. Prentice trampled
Right.
Prudence, and
Uh-huh.
then, yeah, Jamie came back. So
Okay.
that is where we leave off. So I have like some quotes integrated, so I'll tell you guys when it's like a direct quote, and that's where we start. Is she
Okay.
says, "It's been a long time since I moved into this apartment. Picked up that damn note from the tenant before me, and unlocked a world of demon window cleaners and vile rat-like creatures that live left." So she goes on to explain how she's sorry for ignoring everyone's good advice and then for ghosting after the last note of season one, but explains that she was in such an emotional and like illogical place after all that had happened to her right after the move in, and that's sort of her excuse. So now we get into it. So again, we left off at the end of season one with Kat saying Jamie's back. And she says now, so she caught Jamie by leaving cat food out by the door shortly after that last note. Quote, looking at the small, deformed humanoid creature hunched over, crunching on cat biscuits, with sharp, jagged teeth tucked under a grotesque rodent nose made me feel sick. I
Ew.
instantly knew that I'd made a mistake, that the love of my life was gone for good. But that thing had Jamie's eyes. They were unmistakable. Suddenly, Prudence's need to keep Lila around made sense. I could see an entire life in those eyes that had been ripped away from me, and I was too selfish to let it go. I suppose in that respect, I'm exactly like her, exactly what you all think, a monster. End quote.
Oh no.
So she decides to keep him hidden in the walk-in closet in their bedroom, and he's weirdly like not aggressive towards her. Like he'll
Hmm.
hurt her on accident, like nipping at her when she's trying to feed him the cat food, which like the whole situation is just like what is happening.
Uh-huh.
Um and she insists that this like walk-in closet is nothing like Lila's cage, and I'm like, sounds like a cage, but okay.
Mhm.
Um but it's big. It's like a really big space, and
Okay.
she locks him in with like a padlock, so he can't like get out on his own. But he's, yeah, like I said, not like aggressive.
Mhm.
She tries to sort of find pieces of Jamie in him, like talks to him, tries to like remind him of their life. No dice. She
Mhm.
considers killing him and just like can't do it.
Yeah.
So she throws herself into the community. She's babysitting for Terry, her like nice neighbor who's become her really good friend, and is tending the garden in hopes that Derek will come back to help her. So Derek was the man who basically appeared and like supported her through, like, basically told Prudence how to get Lila back, and then told
Mhm.
Kat that he told Prudence how to get Lila back and ended up killing Lila, like sort of tricking Prudence and killing Lila because she shouldn't have existed in the first place. And then he disappeared. So Derek was just like a mystery, and he was really a source of comfort for Kat. So he'll be coming back in the story, like not as a person, but as like he's an important character.
Yeah.
So she's like tending the garden, hoping that Derek comes back. And she explains that like she knows that it's crazy, but she feels so connected to this place. And that's why she never left. Is it was like as soon as Jamie died, which was night 2, like the whole thing just seemed like insane until Jamie was missing and then he was dead. And she was like, I can't leave now. Like I can't leave him here.
Yeah.
So, and then COVID strikes. So this was written, during the pandemic time. So this part cracked me up. She said, when they deemed the window cleaning non-essential, it sent that particular pest into chaos. He still appeared on the balconies, but instead of the relentless niceties, he just scratched desperately at the window. Like so creepy.
Yeah.
But he like got fired.
Yeah, for COVID.
Yeah. So
interesting.
COVID layoffs. So the residents committee sets up like a Zoom program basically for the residents to check on each other. And then also for like the elderly residents, for like the younger people to go and check on them like physically. They don't go in, but they stand in the hallway and like ask, what do you need? I'll go pick stuff up for you. Whatever. So it's like kind of nice.
Yeah.
So Kat got her neighbors, Percy and Sylvia, who live next door, Mr. Prentice, who trampled Prudence, and a woman named Miss Esther Beckman, who's a blind elderly widow who she's never seen, but she forms a really nice, like quick bond with her. So she's asking like, what can I do for you? And she just has a couple like minor asks. And she's like, mainly, I want you to pick up some cigs for me. So get me this pack, whatever. So, and then as she's about to leave, Esther is like, go through the park on the way to the shops. Don't go the route around it. And Kat's like, that's weird because going through the park actually takes longer than the other route. But then she's like, whatever, this whole building and the residents are so weird. So whatever. So she takes the park route as Esther told her to. And while walking through the park, she hears tires screeching and a loud crash. And a car had slammed into a motorbike in the zebra crossing, as she calls it, and caused a massive accident. And she realizes that had she not heeded her advice, she would have been right there in the crosswalk when that crash was happening.
Whoa, psychic.
So, so she gets back and she confronts her and she's like, how did you know that? And basically Esther's like, I'm not some cliche blind woman with second sight, but like, she is. She has these like really strong, accurate instincts, as she calls them. And she talks kind of about like how she's the reason why Kat had never seen her before is because she was kind of hiding because like people in the building learned about her gifts and like really like exploited her for them. So the only person that she sees who she recognizes who's associated with Esther is her son. So her son comes in and out of her unit, but she'd never met Esther before. So she also hated Prudence because she was like, what unit do you live in? And she's like, oh, this one. And she's like, oh, great. I hated that woman. So they kind of bond over that. They get into a routine. So she's like running errands for her. And it seems like it's maybe over the course of like weeks or even months. And we jump to this. So one day she says, just before I left, she stopped me and told me that she had an instinct that she needed to tell me about. It was unusual as she didn't like to share them and I didn't like to pester, but she insisted it was important. Kat, one of your friends needs help. You need to know that it is possible. It won't be easy, but if you look hard enough, you will find a way. So of course that seems to be Jamie. And she falls asleep that night thinking through like what that could possibly mean. She wakes up to a bunch of missed calls from Terry because Ellie, her daughter, had escaped the apartment trying to go see Kat in the middle of the night. And Terry, on the way, goes and gets her. And on the way back, escorting her daughter back home, saw Miss Esther Beckman walking onto the lift at 2:15 a.m., which is the no-no time.
Yeah.
So we cut to part 2. So Part 2 begins with Kat mourning Esther, trying to understand why. I mean, it's suicide. Like, it was suicide to walk on the elevator at that time. And she was like, Esther had plans. Like, she was so full of life. She was excited to be seeing more of her son once COVID ended. And we had plans to have tea actually in the same room. And like, she's like, it just doesn't make sense. But she's also really stuck on that last instinct that Esther shared with her about, is Jamie the friend in question, or is it someone else? Maybe it was Esther and she just didn't realize that Esther was in trouble.
Yeah.
So,
good point.
yeah, so Terry and the kids come by to basically like share their condolences from the hallway because COVID. And mid-visit, Jamie, who's locked in the bedroom closet, starts losing his shit, like slamming himself up against the closet doors. And she's like, Terry's like, are you okay? What is that sound? And she's like, oh, nothing. So she like has to lie and basically like slams the door in Terry's face.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh my God, I'm afraid to open these doors to the closet because he's never been so agitated like this. And this line really made me laugh. She says, how the fuck did my life come to that? Hiding from my undead semi-rodent boyfriend.
That whole...
If Noah's ever rude, I'm going to be like, you're being a real undead semi-rodent boyfriend.
That's kind of like the would you still love me if I was a worm?
If I were a worm, yes.
Would you still love me?
Have we had that conversation?
Undead half rodent.
Exactly.
Probably.
His answer better be yes, no hesitation. But here we are.
Yep.
So she's kind of panicking because he's like not calming down, and Terry starts calling her. So she's like feeling really overwhelmed because she's like, I don't know what to do with Jamie. Terry's calling me and I can't tell her the truth that I have Jamie locked in here. And so she says aloud to Jamie, I don't need this right now, Jamie. And she'd spoken to him a bunch before, trying to get him to like respond. Obviously not expecting a response from him, but this time from the other side of the door, she hears cat in a raspy voice that almost sounds like it's sort of painful for him to speak. So she opens the door in like a hurry, and they have a moment where his eyes look like his eyes. They're blue and clear and seem to be understanding. And then they go black and he attacks her, like gets up on two hind legs, lunges at her. And as he's sinking his claws into her chest, kind of snapping at her face and like drooling, like just gross, she grabs the fireplace poker and jabs it into his neck. So he like squeals kind of and like slumps off of her. And she's like half worried that she's killed him, half relieved that maybe this whole mess is over, and is like, oh my God, did I just kill him? And then he starts breathing and the wound appears to stop bleeding. So he seems to have like weird fast healing powers, although we don't ever hear anything more about that, at least not in my sections. So he's still passed out though. So she drags him back into the closet, shuts it, locks it, makes herself some tea, trying to think through Esther's vision, this weird ability to speak, and then the attack right after. And then the screaming starts. So Jamie starts screaming, and he screams for hours, not in pain, but seemingly in anger. And so she can't take it anymore. And she's like, I have to leave the apartment. I just have to get away from this. And of course, like this freaky building, I'm sure the residents hear the screaming and they just like don't check on her.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, oh, just a normal weird oddity. So she leaves the apartment, she walks down the stairs, and she sits on a bench near the garden she's been tending when she hears this like mewing sound, and she realizes it's coming from 3 little hairless kittens that look like the hallway kittens. So she's like, oh my God, like they can reproduce? Like what? Because the cats are supposed to be like the people who died in the fire on the 9th floor. So she's like, this is the weirdest thing. How is this building still surprising me? So she bundles them up as they appear to be freezing, and she starts kind of like calling for the mom cat, looking around. It doesn't show. So she starts kind of searching through the bushes to see like where they might have come out of the building. And she finds a grate that leads to what looks like a basement that the block supposedly doesn't have. And there's a weird vine growing out of it. So she's like stooping down, like trying to see inside, like trying to like get a clear picture of the room, but it's pitch black. And then she looks down and realizes that the vine is like wrapping itself around her feet and legs, like grabbing onto her. So she panics, wrenches herself free, hears like a yowling sound coming from the grate, and snaps off a piece of the vine in the process. And so she's like, I don't know what to do with this. So she just like throws it in her pocket and decides, okay, like, fuck this. I'm bringing the kittens inside. So she brings the kittens inside. Jamie, blessedly, has stopped screaming and is now asleep and snoring in the closet. And so she's like, I'm sleeping as far away from Jamie as possible. So she falls asleep on the couch, wondering what the fuck is in that basement and how did I not know it was here?
Yeah.
So one other thing that I just put like note, she mentions that she's been in the apartment for about a year now. So if you're wondering like how long has this been going on, it's been about a year.
Okay. So imagine living there for a year.
Unreal. Unreal. You need to move out, sis. Okay, so cut to part 3. We're really moving now, folks.
Yep.
So she is a proud little kitty owner of 3. Cute. And is really like kicking herself for letting this stupid building surprise her again. So she's thinking through like the logistics of the basement. She says, I knew that the building had sealed off floor 9 after the fire, but I never considered the possibility of other hidden floors or flats. Every other floor from the ground up was accounted for, so there were no stairs leading downwards. I hadn't set foot inside the lift since Derek had taken me in there, and I couldn't remember an LG or a -1 button from when he had. So she's like, elevator doesn't go down there as far as I remember. There are no stairs. Like, what is this room? She's also still wondering, like, why the fuck Jamie just attacked her out of nowhere when he'd never been aggressive like that before. And then she notices that the piece of plant she took home, she had put it in water. It grew a lot overnight, like was draping down the side of the counter with like big leafy green leaves, like sprouting everywhere. And she's like, what the fuck? So she's like, I'm going to get out of here. So she goes out to run her errands for her elderly COVID charges, Mr. Prentice. And when she comes back, she goes to look for the basement again, but the grate is gone now. So she's like, what the fuck? So she's like exhausting all the options. She's like looking around the stairwell, trying to find more stairs down because the stairwell kind of plays around. So she's like, maybe like hidden sometimes unless you have the intent to go down there.
Right.
And she's like, all right, well, there's one more place I can check, which is the elevators.
Oh no.
So she goes into the elevator, suspense, but there's no basement. It's just ground floor. Okay. So she's like, okay, whatever. So she goes back to the apartment. You like that?
Good suspense.
She goes back to the apartment, notices the vine has grown even more. She's basically turning to Jack in the Beanstalk.
Wow.
So she tries to cut off a little bit to bring it back to the garden to compare it to the other plants out there, but it breaks her scissors. She can't cut it. It's so strong. It breaks her scissors. So she's like, what the fuck? So she's like, okay, I need to figure out this basement. She's like, I know. I'm going to look online and see if I can find the original like blueprints for the block to see if there is a basement in the plans. But info is super limited beyond the fact that it was built in 1951 when these like high rises were, you know, rising in popularity, until she comes across info from the time of the construction. She says, according to the articles, it was a turbulent project from start to finish and was overseen by an architect and property development mogul who designed and paid for the building himself. There were reports that he was notoriously difficult to work with and that 3 construction firms pulled out of the project. The next headline I came across intrigued me. Cursed project finally completed. Owner found hanged in unoccupied high-rise flats. So she's like, wait, what? So there's this like dark history in the building beyond the fire. So she's like looking, trying to find more information about this suicide or even just the architect's name and can't find anything. And then she finally comes across another like illegible article aside from the heading, which is heir to tragic high-rise architect's fortune, suspected of killing his own son. So she's like, what the hell? So digs in further, trying to find the name of any of these players involved, and finally finds this. His name was Albert Miles, and he was the eldest of two brothers. When his revered architect father died, he took over management of the tower block that he and his brother had become the very first occupants of. He was hugely successful and pegged to become one of the biggest names in property development in the UK. The once empty block was mostly full by the time the killing happened. Police were called by a resident living directly below Albert Miles, who complained that blood was dripping onto their balcony from above. Blech.
Yikes.
When police arrived, Albert was nowhere to be found, but the body of his 19-year-old son was starting to decompose in the sun on his balcony. He had been stabbed multiple times. Albert was never found or convicted, and the case remained unsolved. However, most were in agreement that he did it. A bloodied kitchen knife belonging to Albert dropped just inside the doors to the balcony all but confirmed it. So she's like, holy shit, like, this is fucking dark, but also, what does this have to do with my situation at all, beyond, like, the building being, like, a little evil? So she's like, okay. So she, like, looks up and realizes that this vine has grown clear across the room. It's wrapped around her shoulder and is like reaching for her computer screen, like stroking the screen as she's reading this like blog article. And then it like drops to the ground. So she interprets this as basically encouragement to keep searching. So she sort of like feels good energy from this plant. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to keep looking. She can't find anything. So she's like, I'm just going to send an email to the blog writer. So she sends an email to this man, Simon, who had written about all the info about Albert. And he basically says, like, we have no extra information other than what I've included, aside from a photo of Albert and his brother. And so she's like, all right, well, that's frustrating. So she opens the photo, and standing beside Albert, who she's never seen before, is his brother, Derek. And it's Derek. It's her Derek. Yeah. So that's the end of part 3.
Wow.
Part 4. So she's shook about Derek being connected to the building in this way. And this plant is growing wild. It's grown around like the entire perimeter of the room. She's like, what is happening with this plant? Kat decides she needs to call Terry to apologize for their last interaction, and also to ask if she knew anything about Derek having a brother. And Terry, one thing I didn't know, when Terry had come to the door to, you know, express their condolences with the kids, she looked terrible, like exhausted and just like dark circles under her eyes. And she notes that she like FaceTime calls her, and she notes that Terry looks like even worse. She just looks totally worn out, and like she describes the dark circles under her eyes as looking like inky, like they've been tattooed. So she's looking like not right. She doesn't tell her about Janie because yikes. But she does talk about Esther's prediction and just like how weird, like who is the friend, like how vague. And asks if she knows anything about Derek's brother. And Terry is like, where did you even read this? Like, no, I've done, not that I know of, but like, where are you getting this? So she sends her the info on Derek's family and tells her about the grate and the vine as well, about the basement. And Terry's like clueless about the whole thing. So on her way out to run errands for Mr. Prentice, she again sees Esther's son in the hallway, and she hadn't seen him since Esther passed. And he's like super teary-eyed and just like not looking good. But she's like, I feel like a little ashamed, so she doesn't like go and speak to him. So she like runs her errands, returns home to find an unexpected visitor in her home. Albert Miles. So he's clearly not a nice dude. And they're having a very threatening back and forth when she remembers a detail from Prudence's original note. Rule number 1. The landlord will never bother you. He doesn't visit, call, or communicate in any way, but make sure to pay your rent in a timely fashion always. I have only dealt with him once in 35 years, and let's just say I never missed another rent day. Any repairs required, you speak to the agent you rented the place with. So, not a good dude. Seems to be the landlord, her landlord, and maybe of the whole building, given his father was the owner, died, and then, you know, with his now deceased son, also has occupied the building. So There's a long conversation that is mostly just like threatening, but he basically implies that all of the weird creatures in the building were actually Derek's experiments. And he's very scary and somehow knows everything that's happened. And he was like, let's list the reasons why a landlord would come. She's like, why are you here? What do you want? And he's like, you're late on your rent. You've damaged the property. You've like fucked around with shit you shouldn't have, cat. And she's like, oh God.
Whoops.
So he knows about Jamie, and basically Jamie, he opens the door to the bedroom, Albert does, and it turns out Jamie had already gotten out of the closet and was eating one of the kittens.
No.
I know.
No.
I was so sad. And so he's like, look at this, like, look at what you've like created. Like you just had to meddle. You had to like create this awful thing when he shouldn't exist. Like he died and you just like couldn't let it go. And so Jamie then like notices them after he's done like crunching on this kitten's bones, which is like actually the worst thing ever. And Jamie lunges at Albert. Albert doesn't move at all to like defend himself or anything. He just reaches his hand out, and the second Jamie touches him, he lets out this horrible scream, like fatal sounding scream, and collapses to the floor. And Kat's like, oh my God, he's dead. And when she realizes that, he starts morphing back into her Jamie's body. So he's dead, but he's like him again.
Yeah.
So Albert's a dick about it. He's like, quit crying. Like he's been dead for a long time, like kicks his body. I'm like, dude, like chill out. And then he kind of like softens a little and was like, this just wasn't supposed to be like how it went, and like strokes Jamie's cheek. And when he touches him, Jamie's body like disintegrates into like dust. And she's pissed because Albert's monologuing about how Derek thought people could coexist with the evil in this building, but he was wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then he does this and she's like heated because she's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like she didn't get to say bye to him. He's finally back in his normal body. And this guy just ruined her chance at closure. So she starts like verbally attacking Albert. She's like, you're one to talk when you killed your son. And Albert is like, sister.
Yeah.
So he does not take that well and is like, stop looking into my family and trying to bring Derek back. Consider Derek dead, or else you'll end up like Esther. Because, quote, people here will always do as I tell them. So he murdered Esther, essentially, like made her walk to the elevator.
Ooh.
So weirdly on the way out, and he like stomped on the vine at one other point during the conversation. On the way out, he stomps on it again and like kills it. It like shrivels up and dies. And it's like, okay, this guy is like real intense and evil. And that plant, I guess, was kind of an ally to Kat, which is so weird, but also sure.
Yeah.
Not the weirdest thing we've read.
Right.
So
anything goes.
Anything goes. Kat now has this like dust pile of Jamie and a dead kitten in her apartment, and is like, I refuse to let Jamie's death and Esther's death to be in vain. So she's just like renewed in her like vigor to figure this out, like no concern for the consequences. So, which leads us to part 5. And I'm going to summarize the front part, and then I'm going to read the very end to transition us into your sections.
Perfect.
So she's trying to formulate a plan. She's like dedicated, like, I'm going to bring Derek back, and realizes that if I find one brother, the other brother is going to come. So I'm just going to actually seek out Albert instead, because he's probably easier for me to find and like lure back.
Yeah.
So she buries the kitten's body and then sets off on this like mysterious plan she alludes to for like 5 paragraphs.
Okay.
So then in bold, the story says 1:11 a.m. and she calls the elevator. So she calls the elevator. This is gross. The dead kitten, she took its foot to have like bait of something like recently living, like fresh meat. Ew.
Okay.
But she like drops it just outside the elevator doors so that when they open, it's right there. And then she runs and hides. She doesn't get in the elevator. So the idea is like, she's going to lure them out, and then she's going to run in the elevator, close it, and find the basement.
Okay.
So, or wait in the elevator until Albert just comes. And at this point, she really thinks that Albert actually lives in the basement.
Yeah.
So she's like, he's either down there or he's going to come to me because he's pissed that I'm like engaging with these creatures again, because that's why he got mad in the first place. So
Yeah.
she calls the elevator. These like awful creatures come out and are like sniffing around at the dead kitten's foot. Can't
Ew.
believe I'm even saying that phrase.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Um, so she's like, phase one, check. And she's like, they're going to smell me soon. So she runs for the elevator. And the second she gets in, she's like, oh, this was a bad plan. Like, they're faster than the elevator. So they're going to kill me. And then she sees some creature like running around the feet of these like awful monsters. And it's Ellie in her demon form,
Oh.
Terry's daughter, and
Mhm.
she saves her. Like she scares these big creature things. So it's like, oh my God. So she comes and runs in the elevator. The door closes, both of them in. And so her plan, like I said, was basically to make enough of a scene that Albert would be forced to come back, but he hasn't shown up.
Mhm.
And she's kind of like yelling at Ellie, like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
your mom is going to be furious. And what if these things then like go for your mom or go looking for you and your unit or whatever? And of course, that terrifies Ellie. She's a little girl. She's like, oh my God, my
Yeah.
mom. So she starts like
Oh.
screaming and freaking out. And it's just like total chaos in the elevator. And so she's like trying to hit the floor that Terry lives on to bring Ellie home and to show her, like, your mom's okay. Like, I shouldn't have said that. I
Yeah.
was just panicked because this was really dangerous what you did. You can't be doing shit like this. And the elevator dings and it's brought them to the basement, to the -1 floor. So this is where I'm going to pick up and read the final bits.
Okay.
So I knew, squeezing Ellie's hand, that I had misjudged the situation entirely. Where are we? She asked nervously. I don't know for sure. I think this is the basement, I replied. But the block doesn't have a basement. I know. The door slowly opened to reveal a huge darkened flat. It was luxury, like an underground penthouse, but without a single window in sight, and it was largely empty, not a soul inside. I stood up from the floor of the lift, Ellie's hand still firmly gripped in mine, and tried to take in the surroundings. The lift had stopped directly in what seemed to be a living room. There was no hallway or corridor leading to a set of flats like when the lift usually stopped. In the room was a black velvet sofa, a few side tables, and an almost useless lamp, providing a dim glow in the corner. It lit up a few twinkling cobwebs, and made it just about possible to see a huge trailing pot plant sat on a table that matched perfectly with the vine that had wrapped itself around my foot and then my home. The lack of a nearby grate didn't bode well. Ellie started to cry. I couldn't see actual tears with the voids for eyes, but I could hear her soft whimpers. I searched my mind again for some comforting thoughts, but I couldn't find a single one. If I was right and Derek was trapped here, we were fucked. Trapped here. Jesus. Attempts to jab the buttons were pointless. It was as if the lift had run out of battery. We couldn't even close the doors. I took a step into the room and Ellie followed. Before I could say a word, we heard the metal doors clap together, and by the time we turned around, the lift had been replaced by a blank wall. Where the fuck are you? I screamed, desperately hoping that Albert's smug face would just appear from the shadows. It didn't. All my plea did was terrify Ellie, who continued to grip my hand. It's awful to say, but I was partly grateful that she was there, if only so that I didn't have to be alone. Who are you looking for? She questioned. Someone that can help us get home. I need you to stay close to me all the time. Can you do that for me, please? I hoped with my whole being that I could keep her safe. Ellie simply nodded in response, her horns bobbing in the dim glow. I took a few steps in the direction of the plant, reaching out to touch it, to see if it was limp or alive, like the version in my flat had been. I was disappointed that it was the former. As I ventured further into the room, I noticed that the opposite wall wasn't nearly as blank as the one that had replaced the lift. Instead, indented in the wall were another set of metal doors, identical to the ones that had closed and vanished behind us. Next to the left side of the doors, was a button with the words "Call Lift" carved into the metal above it. It gave me a great feeling of unease. But despite my unease, I saw no other exit, and before I could even consider options, my tiny companion had pressed the button. Even demon kids love buttons. As the doors opened, Relief washed over me to see that it was empty and not full of even more creatures. We took a step inside, and I found myself once again staring at the button panel. This time, I wasn't searching for floor 9. In fact, I yearned for the days when that was my biggest problem. The panel was much like the one in the lift we got here in, except alarmingly, every number came with a minus symbol before it, and there was no sign of a G for ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom.
Scary.
Your turn.
Oh man, great summary. That
Thank you.
was
I tried.
skillful, expertly done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It took me an hour and a half.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll pick up where you left off. So they are in
Beautiful.
that weird, she calls it fake lift in
Okay.
part 6,
Okay.
and searching for Albert. And they end up on floor -2. So
Hmm.
Ellie has a really bad feeling about that floor, but Kat decides to check things out because she doesn't want to go
Idiot.
any farther than
Yeah.
necessary. Um, so yeah, Kat checks it out. She opens the door of the lift and she calls out to see if anyone will respond to her. And she sees it's this long hallway with red doors lining it, just like upstairs, like same look as the apartments upstairs. And sure enough, all the doors in the hall start to creak open, and she sees like hands and little heads starting to pop out, and
Ew.
these creatures appear. So she says none of them were dressed, and they had fleshy limbs and appendages sticking out of all the wrong places. There were elongated necks, multiple arms and spines, but bent completely backwards, which is
Okay.
horrifying.
Don't like that.
No. And Kat locks eyes with one particularly creepy creature, and it lets out this deafening scream. And then, oh, Bo, perfect timing. Hang
On
on,
cue.
let me mute it.
Okay. A deafening scream.
He knew what he had to do. Was that your
Yeah.
job? Yeah. I'm here with my
Oh,
parents'
Bo.
dog for anyone who could not guess. But
Baby Bo.
anyway, so it screams, and then all the other ones start screaming as well. And Kat says that it's the single most distressing sound she's ever heard, laced with torment and pain. And this sound is so overwhelming, she's just frozen to her spot. She can't move, and her ears start like gushing blood. And thankfully, Ellie is somehow immune, I guess, because she's a little demon girl. Um, so she pulls her to safety in the stairwell, which is there's a stairwell now in this floor, next to the lift. So they start climbing the stairs looking for a way out, and they find themselves on floor -5. So there was a woman standing there on that landing, and she had a vacant, sad expression, just like the man who was always sitting on the 5th floor in the above apartment. So they realize that she must be his counterpart in some way, and Ellie senses that this woman is stuck there and she's like deeply missing the man that's up on the 5th floor in the upper levels,
Oh.
which is really sad. Um,
Yeah.
and so they try to talk to her, but she just stands there silently, and they don't know, like, if you're not going to say anything, what else can we do? So they keep climbing the stairs. But no matter how far they go, they keep ending up on floor
Yeah.
-5 because, the
Fuck.
stairs play tricks on them.
Yeah.
But in this case, they think that it's actually probably this woman is causing this. Like, she just
Oh.
doesn't want to be alone anymore, so she's trapped them in a loop. And each time that they leave and come back, her facial expression gets like more and more malicious and like terrifying. So they're starting to panic. And demon Ellie tries to scare this woman like she did with the other creatures that they encountered, but she doesn't flinch other than that she takes a step toward them and they know that it's with malintent that she's moving
Yeah.
towards them. But thankfully, just in time, someone comes up to them and a man appears. He says, "That's enough now, Angela." And at his voice, the demeanor of this woman completely softens. And also, Kat feels this sense of warmth, and it's Derek. So
Yay,
he's back.
Derek!
And
Yes.
as this didn't come up exactly in the parts that I read, but I am thinking now that that vine, because Derek was a gardener, so maybe
Right.
that was like him
Oh,
trying to communicate
yeah.
through that
That
plant
makes
or
total
something.
sense.
So
Yeah, that makes total
probably,
sense.
yeah. So, okay, the next part. Kat catches Derek up on everything that's happened since they last saw each other. And Derek tells her that the place they're stuck in started out as a system of tunnels that
Oh.
his father, the owner and
Mm.
builder of the building, had discovered. And he wanted to be the first person to build a skyscraper underground, whatever that would be called, a ground scraper.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, an earth core
yeah,
scraper.
exactly. So he basically built this as a mirror of the upstairs,
Mm.
just going downwards
Okay.
instead.
That
Um,
seems really dangerous.
yes, extremely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
like 5 builders die down there.
Oh, great.
It's, yeah, bad from the start. So Derek is like, "You cannot stay down here." He implies that he's trapped there, but he can help them get out. So he helps to escort them out, and they reach floor -7, which is the floor where Kat lives above. She's on the 7th floor. And being tempted by curiosity, Kat goes down the hallway to flat -42, which is hers. And it strikes her that if this under tower, which is what Derek had called it, is a mirror of what's upstairs, like what if this was an alternate reality where she and Jamie were happy? She was overly optimistic. But
Yeah,
then
truly.
the the main
Or a demon lives in your house. I don't know.
exactly. It could really go either way, but probably the
Yeah,
latter.
could it? Yeah.
So, even more importantly than that thought, though, she thinks of Esther, or Essie, as she calls her. And she's like, what if in this reality, Esther had survived? So, she pounds on the door of Esther's flat, and sure enough, someone comes to the door. She says, "My friend was stood at the door, face twisted into a horrifying expression, her mouth lulled open much wider than should be possible with a functioning jaw."
Oh God.
Yeah. More alarmingly, her eyes had been entirely removed, leaving red,
Oh
bloodied, gaping
no.
wounds central to her face.
Oh
Yeah,
my
this
God.
is gruesome. um,
I would
Tufts,
never recover if I
no.
saw a friend looking like that.
How can you even tell it's really her? I mean,
Right.
yeah, she's so disfigured because she says tufts of hair had been yanked from her scalp, leaving raw skin in its place. The dress that's neatness I had previously marveled at was torn and distressed around the edges, barely covering her swollen, deformed limbs. So, yeah. And then Esther collapsed to the ground because her legs are broken and she
Oh
can't
my
stand anymore.
God.
Yeah, so she's
Upside
been
down Esther got the shaft.
yeah, she's been through the ringer. And Kat is outraged, both for Esther's sake and also thinking that Derek knew that she was in this state.
Mm.
I don't know
Yeah.
why she assumed that necessarily, but she thought he knew and that he had just left her that way. But he's like, "I insist that I did not know this." And then, of course, right on cue, they hear a like slow clapping
Oh
coming
no.
from her apartment, and there's Albert in the doorway with a smug grin on his face.
Typical Albert to be smug.
Yeah, of course he's smug. He did do that to Esther. I was going to say
Yeah,
probably, but he did.
he
He
did.
was the one that caused her horrible everything. So,
Disfigurement. Yeah.
yes. So now we're in part 8. So they have a confrontation with Albert, and he shares that he is responsible for the creation of the creatures that live in the building and in the Undertower. So,
What a liar.
yeah, he continues to sort of imply that Derek was involved in a certain way, but we'll talk about that later. But mostly it was him, and he owns up to it. And Ellie obviously is still with them, and she's in her
Oh my
demon
God, right.
form. And he's like, "Oh, but I didn't know about her." And he's like, "I need to collect
Ew.
her." Basically,
Creepy.
yeah. So he's like, "How did I not know I need her as my part of my collection?" Is what he said. So obviously, they're not going to let this happen. So Kat
Right.
attacks him, knowing that she's likely going to be killed in the process.
Yeah.
But thankfully, Derek like musters up some strength, and he is able to throw Albert off of her hard into the wall. And then Kat hears like this pretty familiar sound, but it's amplified and like way bigger than before. And it's the sound of Ellie growling. And somehow she has grown to be gigantic, and she is tearing into Albert. the the description was like even more gruesome than with Esther.
Oh my God.
I didn't quote it, but
No,
it
I'm good.
was, yeah, it was terrible. So she killed him, and that's,
Excellent. Well
yeah,
done.
no, that's the
She's like,
end
I
of,
don't need your help, Derek. I
yeah,
got this.
exactly.
You
That's,
weakling.
yeah, she can take care of business.
She can. I'm so jealous you have a beach plum LaCroix
Oh,
right now.
I know.
It's the best flavor and I
Yeah.
can never find it.
I'm sorry. My
That's okay.
parents always have this. I have to have one every time I come up here. I love it.
King and Queen.
Yeah,
King and
exactly.
Queen Keith. We love it.
Exactly. So, okay, Albert is dead, hopefully, or at least like torn to shreds so that even if he is still alive,
He
he's
would
gonna,
survive that, honestly.
yeah, if he did survive, he would be like Esther, like
Right. Okay.
messed up and
Broken.
weakened.
Yeah.
So the group goes back to Esther's flat, and Derek, this kind of comes out of the blue. He has like healing abilities, which maybe is what
Well, that could have been
Jamie,
helpful another
yeah,
time
exactly. So
when her
he,
friend nearly burned to death,
right,
maybe.
exactly.
God, Georgia.
Yeah,
Poor Georgia.
poor Georgia. So, yeah, he is able to sort of heal Esther to a somewhat recognizable state.
Okay.
And she and Kat are able to have a short conversation on the couch
Mhm.
before she actually does like let out a last breath and she dies.
Oh,
But
sad.
at least her body is not in a million pieces anymore. So,
No. And in so much pain,
yeah,
probably.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, peaceful at least.
yeah, exactly. So, but before she dies, she tells Kat, "You have to go home," was what she said. And you would think that that meant upstairs, but somehow Kat like senses or understands that she should go to her flat in this under tower. And turns out that's right because that is the true elevator somehow for them. So you could not get back up from that fake lift that they started out in, but for whatever reason, her flat, they're able to get back upstairs. They see sunlight streaming through the window and they realize what has happened. So, and Derek was in that room with them, and somehow that seems to have broken his curse, so he's no longer trapped
Oh,
in the under tower. He
okay.
is back upstairs and able to move
Okay.
around. So that's
Love
great
that.
news. Um, so after they get back upstairs, they immediately go to look for Terry to reunite Ellie with her family. And Terry is still looking a mess. They learn that,
It is
I
looking
mean,
bad.
yeah, she looks awful because Ellie was missing. And it turns
Right.
out that Eddie is now also missing.
Oh shit.
So the reason for that is that I guess Eddie had gone out looking for Ellie because that's
Mm-hmm.
his sister. He wanted to save her.
Yeah.
Um,
Cute.
so they don't know exactly what happened and they don't go into too much detail, but Mr. Prentice comes out and he
Okay.
has little Eddie in tow. So
Oh, Eddie.
everyone's fine.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a really happy family reunion and a happy reunion between Mr. Prentice and Derek, who are old friends.
Oh, that's
So,
right. Oh,
yeah,
that's so
so that
nice.
was really nice. But in typical fashion, that's not the end.
No,
And Derek,
it's never the end.
no, Derek says, "There's a few more things you need to know, Kat. Go get cleaned up and meet me in the garden." So now we're on the final part.
Ooh. All right. Let's
So
go.
I'm going to summarize the beginning and then I'll read the last. So Kat goes into her apartment to get cleaned up, and she finally has this sense of peace that she hasn't had since moving into this godforsaken place.
Yeah.
And so,
God, forsake.
yeah,
God was like, nah,
no,
all of this is my realm except that
yep,
block right
I'm out.
there.
Yeah, so
Uh,
she falls asleep for hours um, before she wakes up, rushes out to the garden to meet Derek, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I fell asleep." And he said, "It's okay, I had some stuff to do." And he pulls out the cat, the dead cat with the missing foot.
no. Ew.
And he's alive,
Wait,
though.
had you read my parts, or were you just like,
No.
what the fuck is
Yeah,
happening?
I had no, I had no idea. I didn't look.
You're like, oh, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense. Oh, that is so funny.
yeah. And I guess his name is Mr. Meow.
Yeah. I
So,
didn't share the names because it
yeah.
was like whatever.
Yeah, it was Mr. Meow, Tetley, and
Tetley
one other.
Whiskers, I think.
Okay, yeah. Tetley is a
Yeah,
cute name, a little
Tetley
T.
is cute.
um, okay, so yeah, he has Mr. Meow. And Mr. Meow is
How is
really
Mr.
happy.
Meow alive?
I don't know. And,
And
but,
also, if she hadn't taken his foot, he wouldn't be footless.
right. Yeah, so I don't know, but he was like, "I know what you're thinking. I couldn't have done this with Jamie." Like, I don't know. He doesn't explain why, but
Yeah, like he could bring the
um,
cat back, but
yeah,
not Jamie.
exactly. So who knows? But anyway, they talk about.
Anyway,
They then have a conversation about how Derek and Albert, when their father died, and they
mhm,
were to take charge of this apartment building, they reacted really differently to
mhm,
their roles in it.
got
So
it.
early on, there was still weird stuff that went on, but they weren't so scary as they are now.
Yeah,
And Derek actually viewed them as sort of magical, that like magic that they were lucky to be privy to in a way.
I
But
see.
Albert just got more and more paranoid and his mental health was slipping. So
Yikes.
when he moved into the apartment building, he decided not to bring his family with him, to keep his business and personal lives separate from each other. But his wife and son would come to visit him occasionally. But as time went on, his wife would leave their son with Albert under the guise of going out shopping, when she really would go to visit Derek and say, "I don't know what's going on with Albert. Like, something is really wrong with him, and I'm
Oh,
worried."
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But neither of them knew what to do. So Albert's mental state continued to decline, and he eventually stopped answering the door for his family altogether when they would come to visit.
That's
So,
terrible.
And at that point in his story, Derek says that they need to go up to Kat's flat in order for him to show her the rest of the story, which is ominous,
Okay.
but they
Yeah,
go up.
very.
Yeah, they go up, and he describes Albert's son slash his nephew, Jonathan. And he says that Jonathan was just heartbroken by the fact that his dad cut off contact with him. And he passed away at just 19 years old. Um, he had started his own business, had a fiance, and even in the worst of times, he never gave up on trying to see his father. So, in a bid to see Albert, Jonathan had started a window cleaning business. So,
No.
yeah, so the window cleaner is Albert's son. He's the one that continues to come back. And the reason that he's out there is because when he was washing the windows on the building, he knocked on his dad's window to try to see him. And Albert went crazy. That's when he killed him, stabbed
Oh,
him.
so he did kill the
He did
son.
kill him.
My God.
Yeah,
Evil man.
I know. So Jonathan is the window cleaner who still comes around.
Okay.
Um,
Explains some stuff.
yeah. And just in time at this point, the window cleaner appears at the window. And Kat remembers the rule that was set out for her to never engage with him under any circumstances. And
Well, Prudence was also a big old bitch,
yeah,
so
yeah,
fuck her
she
rules.
was. Exactly. However, it was a rule that we'll find out that Derek put into place himself.
Oh, I see.
So I'll just read the rest.
Yeah,
So
okay.
he grabbed my hand and walked me to the balcony doors, letting go and pulling back the curtain to reveal the friendly looking man I'd always seen outside my window, collapsed against it, scratching on the glass. Upon second inspection, I could see the family resemblance, but it wasn't
Mm.
one that I'd ever considered possible before. Prudence had told me about her experience with him, with Derek showing her what he truly looked like. I still hadn't expected quite what I saw when Derek rested his hand on my shoulder and told me to look. The window
Mm.
cleaner was gaunt, with bones protruding beneath his tight, thin, grayed flesh, raw skin, and wounds that were in varied stages of healing. He looked truly horrifying, but what alarmed me the most were his impossibly deep, black voids for eyes. They were all too familiar.
Oh,
I turned to
Terry? Terry, what have you done?
I turned to stare at Derek, unsure of quite what to say as a million realizations crossed my mind. He started to speak again. I didn't want the residents to hurt him, Kat. When he gets inside in this and this form is revealed, so many people tried to hurt him at first. I, f-
Oh,
I found myself constantly telling people to ignore the friendly window cleaner in the hope that he would be safe from their fear of the unknown. I'd seen Albert's reaction to anything remotely different, and I couldn't bear Jonathan to face the same from the entire block. It was safer to leave him out here. After all, only someone who sees the good in everyone would let him in and accept him, and those people are one in a million. Terry, I gulped. So he is the father of Eddie and Ellie.
Terry fucks his
An
dead
undead window
window cleaner.
cleaner. Yeah.
Terry, you necrophiliac
Yeah.
freak! Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So I don't really care how kind he is. It's
No,
weird
you
that
don't
you had sex with
own
him.
a dead guy. Oh, come
Yeah.
on.
So anyway, that makes Ellie and Eddie related to Derek somehow.
Right, okay.
Second, no. Because,
Wait, no, he'd be their great uncle.
yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway,
weird.
that was shocking when I read that. I was like, that's kind of weird. Kind of nice, kind of weird.
I
But
mean, this whole story, man,
yeah,
it's in alignment.
yes, that is true. So let's see, where did I leave off? Yeah, he says, "The second I saw Ellie with you in the stairwell, I knew that she was family. When I realized that Jonathan's new form was a direct result of my actions, I started to come to terms with the power this place had given me. I embraced it and I used it. I used to hide Jonathan from his father, who I discovered had fled to the sealed floors not long after the murder. He never knew what became of his son. That shielding must have transferred when the twins were born. It was why he didn't know they existed." So there's magic in this apartment. Once Albert had discovered his power, along with all his issues and the isolation he drove himself into, it just twisted him up into the man you knew him as. He made it his mission to know all of the special residents, but he never saw Jonathan again. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, emotion making it a little hard to speak. I wondered if Terry had continued a relationship with the window cleaner and why she had kept so quiet about the twins' dad. I processed the fact that Ellie had not only saved my life, but in doing so, she had killed her own grandfather. I couldn't judge Terry or Derek for their actions. He was right. Love works in mysterious ways, just as it had when I made my choice regarding Jamie and when I subsequently accepted that he was gone. I'm showing you because I think you'll understand, and because I don't want you to spend your life riddled with guilt for Jamie. We all make mistakes. Mine was a big one, but out of it came two of the purest creatures to walk this earth, and for that I'm grateful." He smiled again as he thought of Ellie and Eddie. Then he looked me dead in the eyes and spoke again. "It's time I corrected my wrongdoings." Solemnly, he walked towards the doors and slid them open, coming face to face with the monstrous shell of a man holding a squeegee. The the window cleaner took a step inside, struggling to move on his bone-thin legs, and stopped, millimeters from Derek's face. I couldn't help it, despite what I knew he scared me. The twins had balance. Even in their demonic form, there was a visible person there. Their father didn't resemble a person at all. The visceral reaction he ignited in me further proved Derek's point. People will generally attack what they fear. Had I been alone and let him in, I'd have almost certainly done the same. I watched with bated breath as Derek wrapped his arms around the bag of bones in a warm embrace. I watched as he let out a gentle sob.
Try not to
I
laugh.
know. How did she uh, do that with a bag
Yeah.
of bones? And why does he still have the ability
Oh,
to have
I don't
children?
know. I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, okay. Well,
The
anyway.
fertile undead.
Yeah, yeah. So I watched with bated breath. He let out a gentle sob, and the window cleaner began to disintegrate into dust before my eyes. "No," I shouted, hoping there was some other way, a happier solution, knowing full well that there wasn't. There was a heavy quiet in the room for a few minutes. This thing. Okay. "It was no life, Cat. I was cruel to let it continue as long as I did," Derek responded, turning to me. Although similar to the way that I had watched my love disappear on our bedroom floor, Derek's action wasn't filled with malice. It was done for the sake of mercy. Derek came toward me and hugged me. I felt emotionally and physically battered, fragile, and my ears continued to ring, but regardless, with him free and with me, I felt safe. Life in the block could finally begin, with no more dark secrets hanging over me. Amongst all the death and chaos, there was joy to be found. "It's over now, a new chapter," he whispered into my ear as I sobbed tears of relief into his shoulder, and the three cats played at our feet. Days passed, and normality started to resume. I broke lockdown in order to give Terry some rest and spend some time with the twins. It was the least of all my sins throughout this time. It took a lot of explaining and apologizing, but she eventually came round and forgave me for endangering her kids. It sounds simple when put like that, and I'm sure parents reading this would deem me unforgivable. But their kids aren't Eddie and Ellie. And there aren't many folk out there as forgiving and loyal as Terry. Or creepy and weird as Terry.
Yep. Weird, kinky
yeah.
stuff happening
Yeah.
with Terry. But okay, sure. We'll overlook that for now.
For now. Yep. I haven't broached the subject of their paternity to her. I'm not sure I ever will, but I hope that one day she'll feel comfortable enough to volunteer the information herself. Probably not.
Probably not.
Something you take
That's
to
a
the grave.
crime.
Yeah.
That's a fucking crime.
Yikes. I continue to pick items up for Mr. Prentice and take money to Carmilla. I don't know who that is.
It's a bar owner. I skimmed over
Okay.
that, but one of the things he wanted was for her to drop off money at his like local pub so that it wouldn't go under during
nice.
COVID. Yeah,
Okay.
It was cute.
Yeah. So to Carmilla, I'm looking forward to a drink there when this is all over, although I'm sure Mr. P will drink me under the table. The kittens are happy and growing every day. Truth be told, I think Mr. Meow looks badass with his missing leg, especially knowing the heroism
Your fault.
it symbolizes. Yeah. Things had started to look so positive that I almost forgot where I lived. I had been in such a daze of relief that I hadn't noticed that the stairs had skipped floor 5 from the moment we returned from the undertower. I probably would have gone longer in blissful ignorance if I hadn't have found myself on that floor earlier today. The black sign was much the same as the one on the floors below that had sported a minus symbol before it. Thankfully, however, the artificial light that plagued those floors was nowhere to be seen, and sunlight poured in. I smiled when I first saw the sign, prepared myself to greet the man with a new name, but he wasn't there. His absence was a reminder that no matter how many tribulations I may have conquered, living here, there would be another just around the corner. Instead of the man, in his place was the woman, Angela. That's the end. There's gotta be a season.
What the fuck does that mean?
I don't know.
What does that mean? What is the significance of that?
I don't know. She somehow came up out of the undertower
and put him down there?
Maybe. I don't know.
Or hear me out, move out.
Yeah, I think it's time. And you can invite Terry with you, so there's no more.
So she stops boning undead weirdos.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
You know what? We did it.
Yep.
It was worth it. It was a wild ride.
Yeah.
But we're done now.
Yes.
We're done now.
We're done.
And we know now to look ahead to see how many parts
exactly.
Yeah, no more. Folks.
No more.
Hope you enjoyed that.
I did for the most part. But
I did too.
Yeah.
The summaries are better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like a better experience because it's very rambly sometimes.
Yeah.
Like well done, but also rambly.
Yeah. And so imaginative, but
very imaginative.
At the end of that part, when it says Angela, there's a link, and I clicked on it like, oh God, it's going to be season 3. But it just takes you to their main page on Reddit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They have so many stories.
Other stories. I know. I saw that. I like wanted to go in and read them, and then I got sidetracked.
Yeah. But they're probably all like 10 parts, so let's maybe not.
They are. I mean, I think they are. Yeah.
We might have to leave that author in the past.
Yeah.
Which,
sorry, sis.
I don't think we said in this episode. It's New to Town Jam.
Oh yeah.
J-A-M.
New to Town Jam. Wow. All right, folks. Well, thank you for joining us for another holiday scary story sesh. You can email us your scary stories, real or fictional, at girlsgonespooky@gmail.com. You can follow us at Girls Gone Spooky on all socials and rate and review, you know?
Please do.
keep us relevant, friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, Otherwise, we'll see y'all next week. So stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Bye.
Bye.